Hello, Forecaster here, and it is finally time for the release of Commander's Log Continued 0.5 Beta. And since this is a pretty major release compared to the previous ones, and a bunch of things have changed pretty majorly, I thought I would make another video where I go over the changes and talk a little bit about why certain things have changed. So first thing, of course, is installing the application, and we're going to be using a fresh install. Installing is just extracting the archive, of course. On Windows, you just run the executable. On Linux, you have to set the permissions for the two files with this name so that you can execute them. And then you use the desktop one to launch the application. On Mac, I have absolutely no idea what you do with the files. I'm going to start the application, and it is going to generate the data folder for us. It's going to play my intro with my logo, and immediately you'll see a few things have changed in this window. One of them is that the information panel is missing by default. You'll also notice that the settings button is gone, and it has been moved to this little icon down here. And you'll see that the information or help and about icon has changed as well. It used to be gray, which kind of didn't work very well with this background. I don't know what I was thinking. So we are going to add a system and a couple of stations. So system 1, station 1, and station 2. That'll work. And you'll see that the list looks different. We have the system on its own row. They each have an icon. The system has an icon representing a system, and the stations both have these generic marker icons. You'll probably recognize these from in-game. And if I select a station by clicking on it, the information panel for stations will appear. And if I click on the system information panel will appear, which is why there is no information panel displayed by default, because there can now be multiple types. There are currently 2. And you can see that the system has 3 fields at the moment: core star class, controlling power, and galactic position. Now, core star class and galactic position, neither of those do anything at the moment, but they are planned to do stuff in the future. The core star class has predefined all of the types of stars that are in elite, and each of them have a field that tells if this star can be used for refueling or not. And the idea is that this will be used to allow finding systems that can be used for refueling in the future. And galactic position, of course, is the position of the system relative to all the other systems. And this isn't really intended to be entered manually, but instead it will be entered by Commander's Log using the journal system, I think it's called, where Elite now outputs some information to a file which can be read if you know where it is, and I can use that to import certain data. For example, when you arrive in a system, it will output where that system is, what it's called, and some other stuff. So I can use that to automatically add new systems to this list and add their position and such automatically. Now, in the settings menu, it now has categories. You'll also notice these 2 settings, which currently don't do anything, but they hint at what I just said. Auto add systems, auto add stations. You also have this setting, and this is for the controlling power. Now, the controlling powers are the major powers in the game, of course, and these are defined in the presets, and each of these have an official color. And this color is also defined in the presets. So for example, if I select, let's say, Zachary Hudson, because he's red, you'll notice that the system and the stations that belong to that system had the first character in the name colored by that power. And that, of course, works for each of them. And you can remove it to remove the color. If you don't want that effect, you can disable it in the settings like I showed. Let's update that. So, the information window has also changed a little bit. I made it a little bigger, and I added this credit section at the bottom where I'm going to list things that places I get resources from, like button icons and such, as well as maybe people who help with certain things in the future. Now, the most awaited feature, of course, in this release is hotkeys, and you probably guessed what this icon was for. Now, if I open up the Commodities window for a station by double-clicking in the list, of course, it looks pretty much the same. One of the differences is this button here, which is also a new feature, and you can probably guess what this does. Normally, if you have this window and you interact with a different window, it will end up on top. However, if you click this icon, toggling it to an upright position, if I now interact with this Explorer window, the Commodities window will stay on top. That is useful if you, like most people I would imagine, have a single monitor and want to see this window while being in the game, which you can now do. You can click the icon again to turn Keep on Top off. Now, another difference is when you hover over a commodity, it is highlighted, which is not new. However, when you leave the window with the cursor, the commodity will remain highlighted, and that is because it is now selected. And that is significant because of what we're going to go over now. If we click this icon, we're going to get a new window called Hotkeys, obviously. And here you will see the default set of hotkeys that are defined by default. And these are based on the original commander's log, of course, with the num keys, and they are in the same arrangement. The difference is these ones on the top, or at the top here. These are new, of course. And like it says up here, hotkeys are global, which means that even if you don't have a focus on this application or one of its windows, the hotkeys will still interact with the application. So, for example, now I currently have this window focused. I can press numpad 0 and numpad comma, which for me are located the two buttons below the numpad, which allow me to navigate and move the selection up and down, which is nice. And you need this, of course, because you can't necessarily hover over this when you have something else in focus, or maybe you don't have access to your mouse while you're playing and such. Hopefully you'll have access to your keyboard. Unfortunately, this only works with a limited set of buttons on your keyboard, and they're normal keyboard buttons and characters and numbers. It does not work with custom controllers like joysticks and such, I'm pretty sure. I haven't actually tried that, but I don't think it does. So, of course, navigating is simple, and then I can, for example, press numpad 3 to set a commodity to illegal, and you use 4 through 6 to set low, medium, and high demand, 7 through 9 to set low, medium, and high supply, and then I can press 1 to set it back to unavailable, go back up here and set it to unavailable, and these are of course saved as soon as you change them. There's no way to set price or quantity using hotkeys, unfortunately. That requires you to interact with these inputs directly, and there isn't really any way I can fix that or allow that, unfortunately. To rebind a hotkey, all you need to do is click inside of this input here, and then, for example, if I want to have the F1 key assigned to set unavailable instead, because the original commander's log had multiple keys, you could use the F keys or the numpad for these functions. Unfortunately, currently I only allow assigning one key combination to a function at once or at a time, and I could change that, but I don't think it's necessary at the moment. If you think differently, feel free to tell me or create an issue or a post on the forum thread. But currently this is how it will be. So you can of course also use modifier keys, so Control, Shift, and Alt work, and you can use them individually as well, of course, as you would expect. To save the hotkey, you press this green check mark, pretty obvious. If it disappears, it successfully unbound the old hotkey, which was num1 in this case, and it would have assigned the F1 key instead. So if I set this to illegal, for example, I should be able to press F1 to set it back to unavailable. And I can change it back to num1, of course. And if you don't want to assign the new hotkey, you can just press the red arrow to restore it, or just undo the change. Pretty simple, I hope, and hopefully it will work on different systems and different operating systems. In case you are on Linux or Mac, it should, but you never know. If there are issues and something doesn't seem to be working correctly, do create an issue on the bug tracker, and we will work to fix it. So let's move on to the file changes, which will make up the rest of this video. So if you are not interested in that, you can stop watching now. So if we go into the data folder, we will find that there are two sets of the same files. We have the commodities and the presets files, and we have a default and a user set. And the defaults are pretty much what were there before. There's an important difference, however. If we open up the default commodities, I'm going to open it up in brackets, which is a nice text editor. I'm going to use a plugin to beautify the JSON, which is going to make the structure a bit more apparent. And if we go down to the bottom, you'll see that there is now a version number in this file. Now this is pretty much what was here before, minus the version number. And what will happen is that commander's log, when it starts, will take the internal values, which I have encoded into the program, and if this file doesn't exist, it will write those values to the file. If this file does exist, it will load this file into the application, replacing the built-in values. And that is exactly what was happening before. So if you wanted to change, for example, the name of a commodity, you would change this file and it would overwrite the values inside of the application, and that change would appear in the commodities list, for example. Or you could add a new commodity if you wanted to, or a new category if you wanted to. Um, there were a few problems with that, however, which for the future I had to solve. Um, so, for example, if I were to change in a future version of Commander's log, if I were to update the internal values, if this file existed, it would take the values in this file and overwrite the values in the application. So, for example, if Elite added a new commodity and I updated Commander's log to that, even if you downloaded the new version of Commander's log, it would still load the values from this file, which doesn't have that new commodity, and you wouldn't see it. You would have to either add it yourself if you knew about the new commodity, or you would have to delete this file. And the Commander's log would then write a new file which would have this new commodity. To solve this, I've added this version number, which also exists in the application. So if I were to change the values in the application, I would update this version number and increase it by 1. The next time, if you download the new version of Commander's log that have these updates, and you would run it, instead of just loading the contents of this file, it is going to first compare the version number in this file with the internal one. And if the internal one is higher, it is going to overwrite this file with the new values, because it's going to assume that they are more recent. If the version number is the same, or the internal version number is lower, it is just going to read the values from this file as it used to. Now we encounter a different problem, however. When it updates this file, any changes made to it will disappear, because the internal values don't have that change, of course, so that change will be overwritten. And the solution to that is the user files. If we open the user commodities, it contains an empty object. So this doesn't actually do anything right now. But the reason this exists is so that the user can add their own values or override values in this file without actually editing this file. And the user commodities file is never overwritten. So any changes made here are going to persist even when Commander's log automatically updates this file. And of course, currently there's only the automatic update when you update Commander's log, which means replacing these files with new ones that you would download. For example, when 0.6 beta comes out. However, like I've hinted at in the future, or like I've hinted at in the thread, in the future there will be an auto update feature that does not require re-downloading the application. Instead, it is going to use an update server that I'm going to host, and it's going to be able to download just changes to commodities from that without updating the entire application. That is a fair bit into the future, however, but this is also in preparation for that, because it's going to be essentially the same thing. And again, that is not going to overwrite the user file. So you're going to be able to make changes or additions without having to worry about that. So, to demonstrate, I'm now going to make a change to the commodities list. So, what I'll do is I'll change the name of explosives to fireworks, as an example. So what I could do is I could edit this bit right here between the quotes and change it to say fireworks, and that would work fine. It would display fireworks in the application. But I don't want to do that in case there's an update. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to undo the beautification so it looks like this. And what I need is I need the ID of the category. I need the name of the category, because currently it doesn't work if you exclude the category display name for some reason, and I'm not entirely sure why. Then I need the items list, and then I need the explosives. I don't want to include any more than that. I don't want to include this comma, so I'm going to stop right there and copy this bit here. Then we're going to go into user commodities, and in between these brackets in here, I'm going to paste what I copied. Now we have two unmatched brackets, which is bad. So we want to add two brackets at the end to complete these objects. And this will now be a valid JSON file. Of course, it doesn't change anything yet. So I'm going to change this text here. I'm going to type fireworks. And I could also, if I wanted to, change the name of the category, but I'm going to leave it. And like I said, you must have this right now, otherwise it will not load this either. You cannot change the IDs, of course. If you change the ID to something else, that will count as a new commodity. So the currently explosives, because the ID already exists in here, it will override this value. If I change the ID to something unique in this category, it is going to count as a new commodity, which can also be useful, of course, if you want to add new commodities. So currently we have a little dot here, which means that this file has been changed and the changes are unsaved. So I'm going to hit Control S to save. Then we're going to go here and start Commander's log again. It's going to start up. Now if I go into the commodities window, you'll notice that instead of explosives, it now says fireworks. And of course I've done that without editing the default commodities. Could also change the category name. So if I say stuff there instead, save that and start up Commander's log again and load this up. The category will now say stuff instead of chemicals. And then say I wanted to add a new commodity as well to chemicals. I'm going to change that back by undoing that. In the items object in this category, after the fireworks name, I'm going to type a comma and then quotation marks, and then I want the ID, an ID of my new commodity. And the ID is what is used to store the commodity in the stations. So it doesn't store them by name, which is why when you change the display name, the name in here of explosives, without changing the ID, all the existing references to explosives will display fireworks instead. So once you've set an ID and used it somewhere, you shouldn't change it because it will invalidate all those old references. Let's say we want to add clay for whatever reason to chemicals. It's probably a chemical, right? Probably not, actually. And then the display name should be clay. And I'm going to save that. And Commander's log is currently running, so I want to shut it down and then start it back up to load the new changes. So going to station, open up the commodities window, and now there is a new commodity here. That's called clay. And that, if I set that, change that to something other than unavailable, that will be stored in the station. as its own commodity. And it's of course displayed in, I need to close that first, in all of the stations that you have. So that is how the file system works now, or how the file structure works. Of course, it works the same for the presets. You can have a quick look at the default presets. It's a huge lump of JSON. We're going to beautify that. We of course have a version, which is at the top there. We have the commodity statuses. And you can add more of these if you like. And again, you should of course not edit the default file. You should add those to the user presets. We have grades, which are used when sorting trade routes, so you probably shouldn't touch those. We have all the economies. We have the allegiances, governments, port types, and as you can see, these have a max pad size, and we have all the services. We have controlling factions, which is a bit interesting. If I go into here, you'll notice that there is a controlling faction in the station information panel, and this doesn't have any presets. And the reason for that is that there are a lot of minor factions, and these are not powers, of course, because the powers are set in the system. There are a lot of minor factions in the game, and I can't possibly add all of them. So either you type in the name of the faction right here when you get to the station, and if you really want, you can add your own presets. Again, using the user presets file, you should add them there and not here. So this object is empty. There are no presets for that. We have the powers, which have their color values, which is a hex value, hex color code. You should be able to generate those pretty easily if you want to change these for some reason. We have all the star classes, and as you can see, they have a rarity and a scooping value, which is either true or false, which of course indicates if you can fuel scoop from them or not. And that's it. So turn that back into a lump. And that is going to be the end of this update video. And I hope you found it informative, at least to some degree, if you're still watching, that is, or to those that are still watching. And I hope you'll help me try out the new hotkeys and the other stuff, and report any issues you have, either with a post on the forum thread over on the Frontier forum, or by creating a ticket on the bug tracker, which you will of course find the link to in the about window. And with that, I will see you in the next video.